Hello, everyone. Welcome to another product management community event with product people. We're really very happy to have you here. And we're specifically very happy about the topic that we're going to be talking about tonight, which is resilient product management with Philip Baumann. So Philip is the product lead at Ecosia, and he's also a product coach. And he's been working in product management for almost 10 years now. So I think he has a lot of cool stuff to share with us. And we're also really happy to be talking about this specific topic tonight because I think resilience is something maybe a lot of us are not feeling so much this last couple of weeks. I think the seasons have been changing. It's Q4. It's close to the end of the year. We might be feeling a little bit tired. So I think it's a really great time for us to be talking about this topic. Before we jump into the topic, though, I just quickly want to introduce myself. So my name is Stefan. I've been at Product People now for almost 2 years. You can see here some of the experience that I had and the companies that I worked at, and some education and work experience information as well. I'm not going to spend too much time on myself. And then product people. So just very briefly what we do. So we jump into companies on an interim basis. So we usually try to and like to have missions that are a little bit more than, or engagements that are a little bit more than 3 months, but typically our missions are much longer than that anyway. And we come in as product managers, product owners, leaders, and in product ops as well. And we get our hands dirty, help the team to deliver great results. We onboard fast and we align team and deliver outcomes. And then tonight is also something that we really love doing, and that's sharing knowledge generously. We have 40 in-house product managers who act as interims, and you are part of this 28,000 product management community members that we also have, which we're really proud of. Okay, so to warm you up for the topic that we're going to be talking about tonight, we have 2 questions. If you're on any of the streaming platforms like YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of those places, you can let us know what your answers are in the chat. If you're on Zoom, you're going to see there's a poll that just popped up where you can also select your choices. So the 2 questions that we have is, first off, do you know how your or your team's work is feeding into the company's vision? So you have 3 options here. Yes, I'm completely aware as option A. Option B is, yes, I know a little bit about it. And C, no, I've never heard about it. And the second question is, do you think deadlines are helpful? And here you have 4 options. So A is, yes, they're very helpful. B is, no, they're somewhat helpful. C is, you're neutral to this question. You don't think it's helpful or unhelpful. And D is that it's not helpful at all. So I'm going to give you maybe another 10 seconds to make your decision here. I know what I would have chosen, but I'm quite curious to see what type of companies all of you work at and how you feel about these 2 questions as well. So let's give it another 10 seconds and then we see the results. Cool. So the results are in. And at least if I'm looking at Zoom right now, it seems that most people say with question number 1, do you know how your or your team's work is feeding into the company's vision? 57% of people have said, yes, I know a little bit about it. And 43% of people have said, yes, I'm completely aware. At least that's not too bad, I think. And then the second question was, do you think deadlines are helpful? 57% have said, yes, it's very helpful. And 43% of people have said, 43% of people have said it's very helpful, and 57% of people have said that it's somewhat helpful. So it looks like we have a nice little split between quite good answers there. But I think you're tired of hearing my voice, so I'll be handing over to Philip now. Like I said, he's a product lead and product coach, and he works at Ecosia. Philip, I'm going to unshare, and then you can share and tell us your story.
Thank you very much, Stefan. All right. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining, and thank you as well to Product People for hosting these wonderful events for the community, and thanks for having me. So we are living in challenging times. So today we will talk about resilience in product management. But first, I would like you to meet this woman here. Her name is Savadogo, and I want to tell you a little story. So Savadogo lives in Lilengo, which is the capital of Burkina Faso. And in 2015, I was CPO at Ecosia, which is an alternative search engine that uses its profits to fund tree planting projects around the world. And I met her during a field visit. So try to picture the reality there. I do know that for me nowadays, it is, again, hard to picture the reality there. It is a developing country, especially on the countryside. There are small communities that really just manage to get out of the land to sustain themselves pretty much, barely. And we had and have tree planting projects there. Try to picture the environmental and economic reality. The soil over there is at the risk of desertification. They're becoming deserts. And the ground is not sandy, but it is so hard that it's almost impossible to get a plow through. So we're using a technique there, which is called half-moon technique, where you get very big tractors that are very powerful plows that scrape open the earth and then create these half-moons that then, when it rains, retain the water. And that only gives enough sustenance and water for any seeds to grow, really. When we talked to Savadogo on the ground, she told us a lot about how the tree planting activities have changed her life. She told us that now there's more food that they can harvest for the cattle that they keep, which sustains them, and they can find it a lot closer to the village. And that might sound trivial, but for them, that's the difference between an extra 2 hours of walking every single day or not, which makes a huge difference. There's also more water for them because wells that have been drying up are coming back because the trees that are growing and the other vegetation is managing to keep more of the scarce rain that is still falling in the ground. And they also have more materials for the products they produce for the markets, which are baskets and the like. So they are improving their sources of income. You can maybe picture a little bit when we were there how powerful these stories are and how emotional as well. So we went back to Berlin very much motivated. You can see a picture here of our hipster Berlin startup office, like you know it. And then, about 8 years later, now, 8 hard years of working, trying and failing, using all our methodologies, agile, lean, design thinking, you name it, our engineering superpowers. We have 20 million users and planted 225 million trees globally, which is actually the biggest private sector tree planting organization on the planet. Wow, right? Well, that's not quite the full story here. Very often you still hear these kind of stories that sound a little bit like, straight path. You start from a vision, you have your purpose, and you go for it, and then you tell the winner story, right? We all like to do that. We all like to hear them also. But today I want to talk about a different part, which is also a crucial part of this story. Here's another picture. This is about 2 years after the visit to Burkina Faso. I don't have a real picture of that situation because I was alone in that moment and I wasn't really in the mood of taking selfies. This is me coming back. I clearly remember the situation. Coming back to my Berlin apartment from the office. It wasn't terribly late. It was maybe like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening. And I came home and I literally collapsed on the floor crying. And I didn't really know why. I didn't really understand what was going on at that point. During that time, I started to have anxiety attacks regularly, maybe once a month to twice a month. I started to have noise in one of my ears, tinnitus. And I wasn't the only person who was starting to develop mental health issues in my environment, in my team. There were other people that affected in different ways. And there was a shared feeling when we started talking about it of there's just way too much work. There's a feeling of we never get enough done. We're ineffective. We're doing so much, but we can't see the impact of what we're doing. We're not really pulling together, right? There's also then turnover, right? People start leaving this environment. That's not good. And mind you, that was with the best intentions. We had little conflict at work. We all had the same shared vision. We all wanted to pull together in the same direction. So I and others, we really started wondering what was going on. So let's understand that problem a little bit better. Here's some numbers. We're going to look at multiple levels here. First, let's start with the individuum, with the self. Here's some recent numbers from studies. So globally, about 43% say that they regularly experience severe stress at work, and 85% say, this is a global study, that their well-being at work has worsened in the recent years. This is until 2021, so includes some data from the pandemic, which is part of the reasons, obviously. Here's some data for Germany, where I live and most of the people I work with are. In Germany, mental health issues are the second most common reason for sick leave, accounting for 15% of all sick days. There's huge economic value being lost here, right? But I don't want to talk so much about that, because I want to talk more about the pain and the suffering that people have due to this. But there's also an economic dimension here, which should not be neglected. Every fourth person globally suffers from a mental disorder at least once a year. So this is something that concerns all of us, that affects all of us, and that we'll very likely encounter in some shape or form in our lifetime. So I think it's a good thing to think about and to be aware of. I wasn't really at the time. There's another level as well. There's the organizational level. You probably know most of these statistics. 9 out of 10 startups fail. 75, I didn't know this one, 75% of venture-backed startups never return cash to investors. 2 out of 10 new businesses fail in their first year of operations. This is from the UK. And 66.7% of technology projects end in partial or total failure. This is asking people, have you succeeded? 17% of large IT projects go on so badly that they threaten the very existence of the company. So we're still, in a lot of ways, not being very efficient with our resources on an organizational level. Yes, we're getting better every year. We're trying hard, but we're also failing a lot, and there's still a lot of inefficiency. Usually, we think about these two levels, but we're not going to stop there today. Our work has an inherent ethical component, and our day-to-day choices shape the way people use technology, and through that have a significant influence on our societies. I think we must not neglect that responsibility. So let's also look at the societal level here. This is not a very pleasant list to look at, let's be honest. And no one can foretell the future, obviously, but there's a lot of signs that tell us or make us aware that probably the near to midterm future will have more uncertainty, more ambiguity, and more risk than the last couple of years. The 21st century confronts us with massive challenges and fundamental need for change, for transformation. And that kind of brings us to a tipping point where either societies fall into increasing polarization, and then from that we have lack of ability to govern, we have more conflicts and decrease in international cooperation. Or, on the other hand, we manage to work with this change, work with this changing environment. We go through these transformations and we use them to reinvent the way we work and we create value, and ultimately the way we live together on this planet. It's actually that big. It might not seem like it at first glance, but these 3 layers are actually connected. They're interdependent. They influence each other for the better or for the worse. And that is actually a good thing, because it means if we improve one of these areas, it will have a positive impact on the other levels as well. I want to make one more point why I think what we're talking about here is also specifically relevant for product managers and the field of our work. Here's some quotes. Product management is about insights and judgment, both of which require a sharp mind. Hard work is also necessary for this job, but it's not sufficient. Here's another one. If you're going to eat shit, don't nibble. And here's the third one. Product management is one of the most exhausting, exhilarating, stressful, and rewarding careers out there. It is not for the faint of heart. It's for people who want to move mountains. It swallows some whole, but others derive endless invigoration and passion from the pace and the impact and the glory and the huge potential for failure as well as success. Quick test, if you want, you can write in the chat. Does anyone recognize any of these quotes? Any guesses from which authors they are, or even from which book? They are from books. Any quick guesses in chat? Or you can just guess for yourself, and I'm going to reveal now. So this first one, Marty Kagan, inspired. Second one, Ben Horowitz, famous investor, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, one of the standard literatures on all of the must-read lists for PMs. Third one is a bit more niche, in my opinion, a very good book, Making It Right, Product Management for Our Startup World. The reason why I'm showing you these quotes is, okay, picture Steve. Steve just scored his first job as a junior product manager, and he's really desperate for guidance, right? So he's reading these books, and this is the message he's getting. There's a good chance that 1 year later, Steve is not going to be very happy because he didn't, thrive in this kind of environment. He just didn't, toughen up enough. He didn't feel strong enough. He's struggling. He still doesn't, have his bearings very, very well. So there's a bit of a narrative here, let's be honest. And sometimes, we're also a bit proud of it, that we have the tough job and we endure. I'm not sure if this is such good advice, because it means that a lot of people will be left behind. And it means that the group that remains in the end is not very diverse, and we'll just keep reinforcing this narrative because it worked for them. So I think this advice is at least incomplete. And there's another part to this story that we should talk about, as product managers specifically. So let's move to the solution space. Here's our how might we. How might we increase resilience in people and products in order to ensure that they thrive in the challenging times? Because only then we as individuals, as well as our teams, as well as whole organizations and even societies can stay healthy and happy despite everything that's going on. So we're going to talk about these different levels again. Let's start with the personal level. Here are some tried and tested solutions in this space. Here's what you can do. First point is practice acceptance. Whatever the topic is that is stressing you out, the first step is usually to accept it. And in a way to stop fighting it. To accept whatever is going on as a fact, as the current reality that is there. Focus on your circle of influence. Usually it goes gradually out from your person. You can kind of envision it like that. You're in the center. There's some things you have direct control over, usually, which socks you're wearing in the morning. And then there's some things that you have influence over, the way you talk to your stakeholders, etc. And then there's some things which are kind of, if you're honest, kind of out of your control. And that could be within your organization, and that could be beyond that, way beyond that. And if we're really honest, we all do that. We think a lot and fret sometimes a lot about the things which are actually out of sight of our circle of influence. So focus there. These two first steps are actually also sort of the condensed insight from a lot of advice coming from psychological studies around, research on resilience and also positive psychology, if you want to dive deeper there. They're generalized, of course, but they work for a lot of people I've talked to and worked with. There's also personal work management and rituals. Don't underestimate this. We all have our routines. We probably all have our way to capture to-dos, to manage our calendar, these kind of things. But this goes a little bit beyond this as well. For example, how do you start your day, your work day? How do you end your work day? Do you have some kind of routine where you say, okay, work is done, I'm moving on to a different part of my life? These kind of things. How intertwined are they? With the changes in our work environment, more remote, work and more delusion between private life and work life, these rituals actually become much more important. Establish clear and fair roles and responsibilities. So I put that on the personal level, which is true, but it's also on the organization level. And you often don't have full control over this, but it still should be on top of your agenda point. Check in with yourself. Are you clear about what your role is? What is expected of you? And are these expectations fair in terms of what the organization can provide, in terms of your skill set? And if you feel some tension there, address it. Address it and try to clear it up, because often unclear or unreasonable expectations and responsibilities are a big part of what's stressing us out day to day. And sometimes we feel like we can't change it, but it's at least worth a try. Practice saying no. There's a bit of a joke around this. We're very good usually as product managers at saying no, but I've worked with a lot of product managers who are actually quite good at that when it comes to their feature backlog, to their roadmap and things like that. And they're not that good about it when it comes to their personal workload, when it comes about taking responsibility, when it comes about people coming to them and, you know, the role is not 100% clear and you're known as a problem solver in the organization and people come to you. Well, that's nice, that's natural, right? That's recognition. But then you can only do so much, and you have to be really mindful of what you say yes to and what you say no to, also on this level. And then there's learning. You can either do this with peers or you can do this in a professional setup, but I can very much recommend now and then taking the time to having someone who is your sounding board, who's a bit more neutral, a bit removed from the situation, and you can talk to and you can use as someone to reflect on where am I standing in my role, in my accountabilities, in the impact I'm having, in my career, where do I want to go, what are my trigger points? There's so many things to explore there. And when we do this regularly, it usually allows us to really make step changes in our career as well as in our resilience. And last but not least, that should not be left out on this list, physical activity and mindfulness are proven by now to have a positive impact on our mental well-being and stability. So have your routines there as well. Obviously, everyone's different. This is a bit generalizing. So think about these points and find your own way of working with them, your personal, unique, individual way. This is also, I think, a good moment to make two more comments. If there's certain times in your life, and that happens regularly, you've seen the statistics, you know, that's not a very rare thing to happen, where it's too much, where you have serious symptoms in the mental health space, please do seek professional help. And then secondly, I want to say, we can't put all the burden on the individual here. Yes, there's a lot we can do, and that's what I wanted to focus on as well, because that empowers us as individuals. But there's also a certain responsibility on the organizational level to provide the conditions, to provide the environment for people to thrive. It's on both sides. So sometimes there's also situations where these conditions are so scarcely not met that it is actually time to move the environment. So that can also be an outcome of an honest assessment. So don't just put all the burden on yourself, is what I'm saying as a person. There's also a responsibility to the organization. Let's talk a bit about the product level, resilience on the product level. My first and foremost advice here is find purpose and track your impact towards it. Success is more than revenue. I think I probably don't have to preach this to you, but it is still in day-to-day forgotten too much, too often. And this can also be on an individual level. You can also think, okay, what is the bigger reason I'm doing this here as a team, as an individual, if the organization is not providing that answer sufficiently? And then try to really find ways to understand how you're having an impact here. Let's make a small example, because this can also be small. It sounds huge, but it can also be small. There's another person in your team, and the team dynamic has shifted a little bit, and you're struggling with coming together to really, you know, communicate effectively in a remote setup. And you have an idea, and you work through it with the team and you improve that. Well, that's impact, right? You just helped a group of people to be more productive and happy together. And then ask them, does that make a difference? And praise yourself for that. Allow yourself to be happy about that. So find purpose and track your impact, but also on the product level. Let's lean into the methodologies we know and we're practicing. So that's more, I want to reinforce this because we all know they're important and they're good, and we're doing our best to make them happen every day. But increase in ambiguity and uncertainty actually help us with this. These methodologies are designed for these kind of environments. So here's just another reason to really lean into them, right? To regularly be open to change, to regularly be open to reviewing your backlog, your priorities, your agenda, and making drastic changes if necessary. And also having smaller circles and learning regularly will allow us to thrive in disruptive environments. There's product internal and product external resilience. Let me explain what I mean by that. So internally, your product is resilient in terms of the supplies it uses, the supply chains it relies on. Even digital products have supply chains. The partners you're working with, the technology you're based on that is third party, and also in terms of revenue. So let's think about our products in that sense. But there's also external resilience for products, which is how do our users and customers use it? Can they use it if they are in challenging environments? And also, does it give back something to society? I think Twitter is a good negative example here on the development. That's part of it, right? But that's not the whole story of what's happening to Twitter. But I think part of the story is that we're realizing that it's not really adding to our resilience as societies the way the product is currently working and managed. So that's not surprising that it's struggling currently in the market. We're talking a lot about data and using data to inform our decisions. And yes, that's important. But very often we have incomplete data, or the questions we're asking would take so long to answer with data that we're kind of getting in this analysis paralysis situation. And that will happen increasingly because we will increasingly be faced with situations where there's no best practices and where there's a lot of ambiguity, even more than we're used to. And there, I want you to fall back on your intuition, because intuition is basically heuristics. And there's very interesting research out there that if you ask 7 to 8 to 9 subject matter experts on their gut feeling about a difficult decision, you're very close then to the optimum decision than if you would spend 6 months analyzing a lot of data. So there's a lot of situations where risk is managed, where we maybe can allow ourselves to invest a little bit less here and trust our intuition as groups, as individuals a little bit more. So to sum up on the product level, so far we've looked at risks for usability, feasibility, and business viability. And that's not going to change. Those things are still going to be crucial. And people still want human-centered products that are built around their needs. But now we should add resilience as a factor here. We should think about, can we reduce complexity and can we diversify our dependencies as products to make sure we thrive in this environment? Last but not least, on the organizational level, let's think about rituals for appreciation. We should regularly celebrate our success and say thank you. Let's make sure our expectations are explicit and aligned. So implicit expectations create pressure, create friction. Let's avoid them as much as we can. And that's the mirror of the personal level, same point that I had earlier. Let's make sure we can have a safe space and have open, trusting feedback in all directions. Let's make sure there's also enough trust that we can regularly talk about issues like mental health or struggling as a team, as a project, as an organization in a very difficult market situation. Let's allow ourselves to be honest and frank about these things. And let's find ways that this honesty can surface in surveys, in retrospectives, in one-on-one settings, in person or anonymous when necessary. This will help us to increase our awareness of these topics. Let's make sure, and that's not easy, I know, but the better we define our strategy, our priorities and focus, the more we will be able to follow through together. And if that's a participatory process, even better, people will feel included. And this is a bit, I'm not going to talk a lot about deadlines. That could be a whole talk in itself, but this is a bit about deadlines. What I've found is even more important than having deadlines is that we have some form of rhythm. This is the way our brain is built, our human body is built. It's very similar to physical training. You can't just always excel and train. You need also to rest and reflect. And both things are equally important to success. So sprinting nonstop will not really work, and usually does not really work. Find some pattern where that gives you some downtime to rest, reflect, recharge, and use that to get into the next, pillar of really high productivity. And then to all people who have some leadership function here, and share this with your leaders, lead by example. You can't really preach about, work-life balance and mental health and mental well-being and have crazy work schedules and no vacations yourself. You're setting the standard, so make yourself expansible and use appreciative communication. It would really help a lot. In the end, also on the business side, if you remember these sick leave statistics. In the end, we will create a virtuous cycle here, which is really encouraging. So yes, as society and as individuals, we're living in challenging times, but I'm actually very hopeful. This is because in my work nowadays, in my coaching work, I regularly see this virtuous cycle to kick in and to happen. So here's what it looks like. We have resilient people, which make up resilient teams. And these resilient people and teams then build resilient products, products which provide real long-term value to their users and customers, products which diversify their revenue streams, which can cope with change and can adapt and scale if it's warranted at a healthy pace, where the technology and the experience can keep up with the scaling. These kind of teams build these kind of products. And then if you have these kind of products, they strengthen the teams because the teams know I can rely on my product, to carry me also through challenging times. I can rely on my company. I can rely on my users to stick around because they're loyal, so that reinforces itself. And it's even bigger than that. So again, we're not going to neglect that level. These kind of products, which won't topple over the minute the market gets rough, and there's need for fast iteration or pivot, they will be there, and they will be there for the users also in challenging times, so they will know I will still have this product at my side to get my day-to-day job done, that I've relied on so far. So the people will actually also, feel that resilience, all your users, all your customers. And in the end, through that, strengthen our societies as well. This makes me really hopeful. I want to share one more specific, actual example of this kind of virtuous cycle that's happening here to illustrate that. This is Frank. I worked with him this year. And when we started a couple of months back, this is what he said. I'm constantly overwhelmed. No matter how hard I try, we don't seem to make any progress. Not a very good place to be in. Not a very happy place for Frank. So here's, so we had, I think, 5 coaching sessions over the course of 6 months. And about 2 weeks ago, here's what Frank said to me. I have found focus again. I now know that even if things get difficult again in the future, I can do something about it. And that last bit makes me specifically happy and proud for Frank, because it's not so much about, dealing with any specific situation. Resilience is about knowing and having that deep internal confidence that you will be able to deal with future challenging situations that will come. For confidentiality reasons, I cannot really tell you the exact product that Frank is working on, unfortunately. But what I can tell you is that statistically, in Germany, 23% of you, if you're living in Germany, will be exposed to this product regularly. That's a lot of people. So if this product is improving, all these people in Germany will hopefully use that product more. And that would actually mean that the national CO2 footprint will go down. So you can see the cycle here. Resilient people, resilient teams, resilient and better products actually strengthen our society as a whole. So I'm very happy that Frank and team are back on track, and I see these kind of examples every day in my work. So I'm very hopeful for our future. It might not always feel like that to you, but I guarantee you that every single one of you, when compared globally, is actually in a very privileged and powerful position. Your actions and your choices matter. So let's make a difference together. If you feel like unlocking more of this potential, feel free to reach out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. I think that was a super strong presentation from the beginning all the way up until the end. And it really makes us think a lot about our impact, and not only on ourselves, but on our teams and in our organizations as well. So thank you for sharing that with us. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so what's going to happen now, everyone, is we're going to go into a Q&A section. So you can start thinking about the questions that you have for Philip that he will answer for us. Juan Pablo is also going to be looking at YouTube and LinkedIn and all of those places where you are also maybe streaming from. So if you post your questions there, Juan Pablo will send it through to me, and I will also see that. To give you maybe a minute or 2 minutes to think about what questions you want to ask, I'm quickly just going to wrap up with some more information about product people, just to build in some time for us to think of those questions. So the use cases when product people is best used is when you have an interim or fractional product manager or product leader need. So that's when, you know, your permanent product manager or product leader goes on parental leave and you need to cover that. Or when you're hiring someone left, or you have a new team and it takes a bit of a while to get someone appropriate in that role. And also if you need product coaches or consultants, and also where you need some product discovery as well. What we aren't doing, so we're not recruiters. We don't source candidates for you. It's not a freelance marketplace. All the product managers that work with product people are on the payroll and are actually employed by product people. And we're also not a development or design agency, but we could connect you to some people that, or some companies that we think are pretty good, but it's not a service that we provide. Here are some of the B2C clients that we've worked with that we felt very honored to have been able to work with and that we've really enjoyed working with. And here are some of the B2B clients that we've worked with as well. And you can see some positive feedback from our clients here. I'm not going to read through them or spend too much time on it. If you're on YouTube, you can pause here and read if you want to read something about that a little bit more. And then some product people stats. So we've helped over 200 cross-functional teams so far since we started. And we have 40 product leaders and product managers. And then this one is something that all of us are pretty proud of. We have 60% of women in the team, and 66% of the leadership team is also women, which is a great stat, I think, especially in the world of tech. And then this is our team right here. This is what all of us looks like from all over the world. We're a very global team, and we're 100% remote. So if you want to add your picture to this team, we're hiring. So you can take a picture of that first, or if you take camera and you like zoom or hover over this QR code, it'll open a link for you to take you to the hiring page where you can send through your application to get hired and join the team. And then on the right-hand side, you see another QR code that you can also hover over where you can sign up for our newsletter, where you can get some product stories and insights that are written by the product managers within product people. And we're also really proud of that one. So now I'm going to go over to the Q&A again for us. I wonder if we have any questions. Yes, we have a question from Stacy, and she's asking, how do you suggest approaching your company to propose the organizational level solutions you shared, especially for startups or smaller companies where the natural focus might be on output or survival?
Yeah, very, very good question. Underlying that is often the challenge between short and long-term thinking. So I think the first step is kind of also trying to honestly assess where is my organization with that, right? So if there's actually a situation right now which is threatening the company's survival, or you need to make a certain thing happen in the next month. Or there's also a clear intention from whoever is leading the company that this is about, making an exit, for example, in 2 years. Then this is maybe, will make it a lot harder, to be frank. On the other hand, there could be environments where, that people are in it for the long game, right? Or longer game. But there's maybe just a lack of either awareness. So then you can ask questions like, okay, why is it not happening already? Is it, a lack of awareness? Is it that no one's putting it on the agenda enough? Is it that, people don't know what actual actionable steps could be? So I really would encourage to kind of do this assessment first, maybe talk to 2-3 people around you and be like, okay, I feel like this is an important topic. It does affect me. Here's some of the positive and negative implications if we do something and don't do something. How do you feel about it? And where do you think is the organization in their thinking? And then when you have done that, I would go and, talk to the people who have the decision-making power to make some actions, and then, propose a solution like, okay, let's maybe do a survey to understand what is the main reason why people are struggling with this, and what could the organization help with. Is the strategy super clear, but are we not having enough participation in that process? Or is it like, which of the problem areas are actually the problem, and then think of some actionable solutions for it and suggest them to the decision makers.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks for that answer. Then we have a question from Vincent from YouTube. They're asking, what kind of KPI do you use to help convince top management of the importance of resilience and to measure the impact of the different solutions you talked about?
Very good question. I know nowadays we kind of, what we don't measure doesn't exist kind of thing a little bit. And yes, there are really environments that work like that. I usually, again, try to take a step back and also acknowledge that there are some things which are either impossible or very hard to measure. So that's not really worth the effort. And sometimes try to take this conversation more on a, value-based thing. What do we think about people? How do we want people here to feel? And then that will trickle through, the kind of product we build and how our users and customers will feel. So sometimes it is worth the try to take the conversation on that level. But to answer your question, so to measure resilience specifically, there are certain diversification metrics that you can use for revenue, for example, which tell how resilient are my revenue streams. You can also talk to your engineers. Usually they have a very good feeling of what are the breaking points in your technology, either things that you're owning yourself or that you're getting from third parties. So usually when you talk, you run into open doors with this kind of topic with engineers, to be honest, and they just need some help to kind of put resilience on the agenda for the engineering strategy that then can fuel into the overall one. And when it comes to teams, I'm a big fan of kind of pulse surveys and quick mental health related check-ins that you can do in 5-10 minutes as part of your retrospective, for example. And again, it's not about measuring perfectly, it's more about seeing trends and giving something a little bit more objective to asking someone at the coffee machine of like, how's the mood? So try to find the middle ground here.
Thanks, Philip. Then another question that we also have on Zoom from Stacy is, individual resilience is a very personal journey. As a lead PM, what boundaries or limitations should I keep in mind when helping my PM team grow in this respect?
Yes, good point. The biggest limitation is that you can't change others, and you can only support them with change if they want to. So it's really about the mandate. You can maybe, if you're, for example, observing someone struggling with topics like this, you can share with them feedback. I see this happening objectively, as your lead. And then it's up to them to say, okay, I agree, I disagree, and yes, I want support or not, or I want to tackle this in the first place or not. Anything beyond that, if there's no clear mandate to you, then I think you could try still, but it's very likely not going to work. I see this a lot in my coaching work. If there's no clear mandate from the person I'm working with, it's not worth the effort for either side. Other limitations are, or a trap that we often fall in, is that we think we know the solution. I think the mindset of, okay, I have another person here that I'm working with on this topic, once you have the mandate, and that person ultimately is 100% responsible for their life, and they have all the skills and resources to also do that. But sometimes at time they don't have full access to it. But you're not in a position, you maybe think you know what could be best for them. You might even be right, but usually it's a lot better to let them discover it. So really this kind of mindset of asking questions, try to avoid any kind of specific advice on this topic. Just ask questions, and that will, it feels kind of magic, but it's actually a very well-researched methodology in psychology, solution-focused brief therapy. Magically, the solutions appear from the person itself, and they're usually then much more powerful and sustainable.
Thanks, Philip. We also have a question from Kiziltan from YouTube. I'm going to reword it a little bit, but they're asking specifically about the reasons that you found for burnout out of people, and where the working more than 45 hours a week plots within those reasons, on a list of like the highest one at the top and the lowest one at the bottom.
Yes. So there's good research about this out there. The main reasons in our context, or the top three, I would say, is not the actual hours you're working, interestingly. So the top three are a lot more about also didn't talk so much about the sort of the problems there, or the research on the problems, but all my solutions, if you look back on that slide later on, they tie always to a problem. So when I'm saying, know your purpose and track your impact towards it, then the underlying issue usually is that you don't really know how the effort you're doing every day is feeding into the bigger picture. Now that was one of the icebreaker questions. Or you maybe vaguely know, but you can't really feel it or touch it. It's so vague, it's so ethereal. So then, find ways to really measure that. Think about, okay, if we're improving this, if we're refactoring this microservice deep in our architecture, how does that actually tie to our bigger picture here? And sometimes the chain is long, yes, but thinking it through, talking about it will help with this. Other main issues are unclear or unfair roles and expectations. So kind of this vague feeling of, I don't really know what I'm responsible for. Sometimes it feels like a lot, but then suddenly it feels like I don't really have the authority to decide anything. I think this is kind of a dynamic that we PMs are regularly exposed to. That's another big cause. So really trying to sit down with your lead, with your people manager, even at the step of hiring already, being like, okay, this is what I understand will my responsibilities be. Is that correct? Do I have fair, support for that? Will that line be respected? If that line of responsibility and authority gets violated by someone coming in and saying, no, we do this differently now, really giving feedback that is affecting a core part of your work and will damage your long-term effectiveness at your role, being honest about that. So these kind of things. So, and then also, if you're personally good at letting go, at finishing a 60-hour week and saying, I've got a lot done and now it's done, and there's 100 other things that I didn't get to, but I'm not going to think about them now when I have my weekend, and then I'm going to really switch off on the weekend. That is usually a lot better than someone who works 45 hours and does a little bit everything day and night all the time. So again, this kind of rhythm thing.
Thanks, Philip. And then I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. And the way that you ended that question kind of or answer led us really nicely into this next question that we've also received from Ryan on Zoom. So Ryan is asking, when hiring, is there a favorite question you have for measuring a candidate's level of resilience? And I know you've mentioned this a little bit on the other way around as well, because I wanted to piggyback on this and ask, is there a question, maybe one or two, that a candidate can also ask the organization to check whether they are actually healthy with regards to resilience? And I know you mentioned it, but maybe you can just summarize that again for us.
Mm-hmm. So when interviewing, I want to understand how people cope with change, right? And usually, so when interviewing specifically for product roles, people are already quite good with ambiguity and change, right? That's kind of part of our business and what we pride ourselves also to be good at. But still, there's a big spectrum, from people who, when faced with regular change, they need a bit more certainty to function well, and then people who need less. And I'm trying to really get a good sense for where that person is on that spectrum by asking them questions, like, can you describe periods of massive change in your previous life or work life? Share one or two examples and how you dealt with that, and then kind of usually try to read into like between the lines in these answers. And I also try to balance it within the team, because you need a bit of both. You need a good healthy mix, right? Because there's also the other extreme, when people question everything all the time, because right, our environment is changing so much, the market is changing so fast, disruptive technologies all everywhere all the time. How can we be certain of anything? And how can we follow through with any strategy? And that's the other extreme, which is also not healthy. So you need a healthy mix in your team. From the other perspective, if you're interviewing the organization, which is kudos if you're doing that, that's an important and great thing to do, and the first step to find an environment where you're happy and can thrive. I think I would try to ask the same questions, like how have you dealt with change in the past, and also specifically look for how much is that response to change top down versus a healthy mix of top down and bottom up. Because if we're talking about adaptive organizations, to put another buzzword out there, they don't work 100% top down. There's a mix, there's clear direction, decision making, and leadership on a certain level, yes, but there's also a lot of consultation, a lot of effective feedback loops in all directions. So if I ask this question when I'm interviewing for a job, I ask, how have you dealt with change? And they only talk about how they put certain plans in motion top down. Not such a good sign. If they talk a lot about how everyone came together and talked, also not a good sign. So again, you want the middle ground here, and you want to get the feeling that the organization can harness its insights across the organization to react to change, but more in a decentralized way. It's a bit abstract, but that's the kind of thing I would look for when in an interview.
Thanks. Thank you, Philip. So I think with that, we can wrap up the Q&A portion and wrap up the talk tonight. Just want to say thank you so much, Philip. I think it's such an important topic that you've brought to us tonight. And I think it's one of those things that's not really buzzy. It's not going to be less important in 5 months from now when there's a new thing coming up. It's something that will, I think, become more and more and more important. So I think people are going to go back and watch this over and over again. And thanks for making it so specific for us to look at as well, and very practical for us to kind of consume too.
Thank you for being here. Great questions.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, everyone, and have a great evening. Thanks for your great questions.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.